Okay, fantastic. So thanks for being here tonight, everyone. My name is Haley Miller. I am the program specialist for the California region from Kaplan. So that means that I am your access to everything you need to know about preparing for the MCAT exam, when you should be taking it, when you should sign up for it, as well as strategies in order to do well in this exam. And I know a lot about our courses and what different options are going to be best for you. I also have a personal discount. We're going to be going over a lot of this stuff this evening, but I just wanted to introduce myself off the bat. And then before we get into it, these slides are going to be made available to you after this presentation. So if you have any questions or I go through something too quickly, anything of that sort, just don't worry, you're going to be able to have access to these, but you can always ask questions as we go throughout. We have two other members of the Kaplan team on board right now. We have Irem, who is our student brand ambassador manager. She's going to be looking at the chat, answering any questions you might have. And then we also have Hannah, who is our student brand ambassador for Kaplan. She is a UCLA student as well, who is an undergrad, but also works for us. And she'll be talking a little bit more about her role in the next few slides. So we're going to go ahead and get into it.
Okay, I can take over this one.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I am currently a third year here at UCLA, and I've been in SBA for the past year. So if you have any questions about becoming an SBA, we are looking for some new ones. Just feel free to message me. I can also leave my email down below, and I can definitely answer that as well. But we're basically going to start off with the partner benefits that we offer for this club specifically. It is 15% off Kaplan courses if you use that code on the slide. And then, like Haley said, you can also use this link right here to schedule a time to meet with her. She can kind of help you plan out your exact schedule and what works best for you. So definitely recommend using these two resources. And then down below, the last link down here is kind of a free practice question / study guide thing. So if you scan this QR code and you sign up, you'll automatically get sent a free study guide. And then you also get access to different events that we hold throughout the quarter, just for like different preparatory events and different just workshops. So definitely recommend utilizing these different resources.
Perfect.
And then we're also doing an Apple study bundle this quarter. So you win a MacBook Air, AirPod Pros, and then a 6-month on-demand course of your choosing. Again, just use this QR code and sign up, and then you'll automatically be entered to win. So definitely also take advantage of that because it's still going on. So yeah. And then, like I said before, UCLA specifically is actually looking for USBAs because we are a little bit short right now. So we'd love to get your help and read your applications. So if you're interested, that's actually the direct QR code you can apply through. You do get paid, and it's honestly been one of the best things because it's super flexible. So you kind of just make your own schedule throughout the week, and then you it's a total just on your own type of thing. You do have a couple meetings you'll have to attend a week and different events, but it's mostly on your own. You get access to a lot of cool resources and you meet a lot of different people on campus, which is also very fun. And then there's a lot of professional development workshops as well that you can attend. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to DM me. I'll also leave my email in the chat if you have any specific questions about the role. But we look forward to reading applications and we'd love to have you on the team.
Perfect. Well done. Awesome. Okay, thank you. So that was just our quick little spiel. And then tonight we're going to be talking primarily about a CARS strategy session. So that's one of the sections, the critical analysis and reasoning skills section on the MCAT exam. So I'm going to get into what is tested on the MCAT and then how specifically to attack some CARS strategy questions. So here is a list of the different content areas that are tested on the MCAT exam. The MCAT is going to test you on biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics, as well as biochemistry, psychology, and sociology. And it also is going to test you on critical analysis and reasoning skills. This is not content-based, it's more skill-based. So it's not going to be like a required course that you go and take in UCLA unless you take like a logic course, which might set you up a little bit better for something like this, but it's not a prerequisite course. But these skills are actually really vital to identifying your ability to be a clinician, a physician in the future, and it's something that medical schools look at pretty closely in terms of your ability to do well in the future. So the MCAT is a critical reasoning exam in terms of content. So they're going to test you on a lot of different content area and see how well you're able to analyze it in general. Learning the skills required in the CARS section is important for success on this exam overall, because every question that you encounter will be an intersection of a specific content area. So a biochemistry question, a physics question, a psychology question, and some sort of critical reasoning skill. This means spending time practicing critical thinking is going to yield you twofold. Once for the section that everything is going to be tested on, like in the car section, and then again as an asset for every other section that you get tested on. So critical reasoning is going to be like the key to doing really, really well on this exam. The AAMC, the people who write and administer the MCAT exam, identify 4 skills that are tested on the MCAT. We like to list these skills as scientific reasoning and problem solving, experimental and research design, MCAT science knowledge, and data and statistical skills. But here at Kaplan, we've added in a 5th skill, which is MCAT expertise, because the better that you know your problem or your test, the better you're going to be able to solve it and do well on it. So this includes like knowing how the MCAT phrases their questions, how they phrase their wrong answer choices, how they phrase their right answers. The better you're going to be at identifying these, the better you're going to do overall on the exam, especially in the CARS section. So we've spent a lot of time studying the nuances of this exam, and we have keyed down that experience to be able to share it with you in a way that helps you score well and do better overall. We're just going to look at a handful of our car skills this evening. We have a lot more so that you get just a little bit of a taste on what is going to be needed on test day. And we only have an hour with each other, so it's going to be a little bit repetitive in terms of questions that we're asking, but I really want to be able to touch on a few different topics that may be asked on your MCAT exam. So we have a passage strategy and a question strategy. You can't answer questions without reading the passage first. So that is step 1, is preview for difficulty. Decide whether you're going to read the passage now or later. We call this triage. It's likely something that you will hear in your medical field, but do you want to take it on now or come back to it later if you have time? You don't have to do passages in order. Like you don't have to do them chronologically before moving on to the next one. So it could be helpful to decide what you feel comfortable with. The test is in your hands on test day, so you get to decide what you spend your focus and your time on. Long passages can be good at pulling out details, but you have to be good at pulling out the things that you really need to use. Our step 2 is going to be attacking the passage, which means highlighting keywords, outlining things on paper. We recommend no more than 1 note per paragraph. Interrogating or asking questions of the author. And then step 3 is going to be reading for structure and opinions, not necessarily detail, because you don't know like how some big technical term is going to be working. That's fine. We're reading for opinions and not detail. We'll get into this a little bit later in our practice questions. So, okay. And then at the end, we have a trim method. This is our our way of attacking questions for the CARS strategies. It begins with typing the question. So when you're typing a question out, it helps to look for clues in the question stem, which we'll get to a little bit later, to help you identify which of the 8 questions that this question falls into. Using this information in addition to the question and answer choice length and apparent complexity of the question is going to help you decide whether you're going to be able to quickly and confidently answer the question or whether it should be saved for later. So after we type out the question, we're going to rephrase the question. So rephrasing eliminates the fluff information and rewords any confusing wording, including double negatives, which we'll have an example of a little bit later on. This step is your chance to identify what the problem is really asking of you before you move on to your actual investigation. And then we get into investigate and predict. So when investigating potential solutions, we use your rephrased question along with your knowledge of the passage and any notes that you've taken to determine the steps that you need to take or the tasks that you need to fulfill to find the answer. So depending on the passage method you chose, this may include reviewing highlights, referring back to your outline, or referencing any conclusions that you may have drawn while interrogating the passage. And then we have matching. So matching your prediction to an answer choice, we're skimming answer choices until we find one that is similar to or has elements of your prediction. So before you even read any of the question choice or the answer choices, you should have an answer formulated in your head or a prediction of what a possible answer could look like. This is going to help us eliminate wrong answers as well as find the correct answer faster. The trim method requires you to spend more time analyzing the question itself and less time evaluating each individual answer choice, which is especially important in this section because it requires you to read only the question stem and avoid looking at answer choices again. Answer choices on the MCAT can lead to misinterpretations. They like to throw in some like gray area answers that might be right, but for some reason are wrong. That can be kind of hard to identify. And unlike science questions, outside knowledge is not required for the CAR section. So you should not rely on your outside knowledge of what is tested. You should only rely on what is in the passage. And then using outside knowledge is actually a really frequent reason that students get questions wrong in the CAR section. So knowing that, here is that question stem that I mentioned in the previous slide. There are 8 main types of CARS questions. The 8 types are classified in 3 broad categories. So those are the foundations of comprehension, which we're going to be focusing on this evening, but there's also reasoning within the text and reasoning beyond the text. This category, so foundations of comprehension, includes question types that might be the most familiar to you, including main idea, detail, inference, and definition in context. We're going to break down each one of these different situations a little bit deeper this evening, and then give you an idea of what the questions are about. But main idea questions usually ask specifically about the big picture of a passage as a way to ensure that you can see beyond the details of what the author is giving you. They're really easy to recognize because they ask you about the passage as a whole rather than a specific part. And then certain phrases in these questions include the term main idea itself, or central theme, primary purpose, author's objective, and stuff like that. Detail questions ask about concepts and claims that are explicitly stated in the passage. These can sometimes be kind of tricky to figure out from other question types, since detail questions are far from the only ones to talk about specific portions of the passage, but many detail questions are sentence completions, beginning by citing a specific portion of the passage and then terminating with a colon, with answer choices that finish the sentence. They also use declarative language, so is, are, rather than like would, including references to what the passage or the author says or cites. And then we have inference questions, which ask for claims that are not explicitly stated in the passage, but that must be true given what is stated in the passage. So much of scientific reasoning inquires making inferences, including reasoning involved in diagnosing patients. So this is definitely a crucial skill for you to be able to have and do well on. And then definition in context questions refer to a specific part of the text, typically a word or a short phrase that is placed in quotation marks or that is italicized. And then they ask you what the author means by the term used in the passage. The best strategy for this is to go back to the reference text and reread it, looking at the surrounding sentence or sentences to better establish the context. So now that we have an idea of what these different question types are, this is an example of what a passage would look like. So we would start by taking 10 to 15 seconds to preview the passage in order to choose your approach. This specific passage, you can't see it all, but we're going to have 5 paragraphs and we're going to have 9 questions dedicated to this 5-paragraph passage. There's not a lot of punctuation, so it's likely going to be easy to engage with. I would say tackle this if you see it and you feel confident on it when it comes to test day. So sentence 1 of the first paragraph has a relatively straightforward language and it gives a good indication of what the passage is talking about. It tells you straight up right there, visual arts. The length of the passage, and specifically the first paragraph, implies a significant amount of detail, meaning that highlighting would result in a lot of yellow. So it's really important to pull out key details. It also introduces a contrast between well understood visual arts like painting and poorly understood ones that tend to be a bit more collaborative. In this example, I'm going to highlight it here. The contrast is introduced with the word but. So we know that the author is making a claim here. Contrasts are a great resource for analyzing questions. It helps you to think about why the author is introducing this contrast. Based on the discussion included in this passage, I'm kind of just telling you this since we're not reading it all together. It would appear that the author cares more about collaborative art and is using the comparison as a way to introduce the topic and set the stage for what they're going to be talking about later in this passage. So we're going to skip forward to paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 meets a prediction that we just decided on. It begins to talk about theatrical design a little bit. So the example of the author's scenic design professor is also provided. The author begins talking about a professor that they had in college that talked about scenic design. And then this is also really helpful information because given that the author is offering some personal insight into their own life, it's a great place to be like, why? Why are they telling me this? That's always helpful to understand when you're reading these passages. It's helpful to consider the author's opinion and the tone. So the author uses positive keywords like nuanced and masterful. That's something to take a note of, and astonishingly lifelike. So this is going to tell you what the author is thinking of this particular topic when describing performing arts. The author also introduces another but here when describing their professor. So basically, this paragraph is like really helpful for interrogation. Don't be surprised if you spend a lot of time in something that has a lot of details like this one does. And then based off of these positive keywords, the author is definitely a fan of the performing arts. They've offered several personal examples to kind of support that claim. They're really familiar with performing arts. I'm also going to highlight something else here later on in the passage. So it's helpful to think about this contrast when talking about the scenic designs professor. The sentence before the word but paints a picture of the professor as large with a football player's build. And then the sentence after the but states that even though his hands were large, the professor was able to create astonishingly lifelike miniature sets. So in addition to having an appreciation for the performing arts, the author also has a really big appreciation for their specific scenic design professor. All helpful keys. This is paragraph 5. So we're getting into the passage a little bit more. It's a lot longer than the passages we've previewed or than the paragraphs we've previewed before. So we're going to have a few more details in here. The author moves from discussing miniature models in the previous paragraph to introducing actual scene builders in this one. They're responsible for taking the models and transforming them into full-size sets by employing the specialized skills of many different craftspeople. We get yet another but, which is helpful to draw attention to the transition between the model and the building of an actual scene. And an example is provided to help this contrast. So considering all of this information, the author has been building an argument that while collaborative art is underappreciated, like theater arts, it is not deserving of being underappreciated. As the scene designs pass from design to builders, the level of collaboration continues to grow, and then ties back to like the overarching point of the passage that this is an underappreciated art. And then a little helpful cue here that is going to be one of our questions in the future. The author introduces the idea of a director. So interestingly, all that you're told about a director is that they get consulted about necessary compromises. The fact that this is all the author says, even though you may know, like you might be really into movies, sorry, you might be really into like watching theater happen. You may know what a director's job is and that they have a lot more on their plate than just being consulted about necessary compromises. That's not going to be helpful. That can get you to answer a wrong question moving forward. So as we're thinking about directors in the space of this paragraph, all you should be thinking about is that the director's job is to consult on necessary compromises, nothing else. Start from scratch. Okay, I just talked quite a lot at you, but it was really helpful to kind of break down some paragraphs to understand the main ideas that are going to be asked on these questions moving forward. So pretend that we had that question stem next to us. The question that is being asked of us is that the central idea of the passage is, if we were trying to identify what type of a question this is, we would likely find that it is a main idea question because it has that phrase, the central idea of the passage. As the name suggests, this question is going to test your understanding of the overall goal of the passage, not just words on the page. To get these questions right, you have to get inside the author's head and figure out what they're trying to accomplish by writing the passage. So we're going to move on to our rephrase step. Rephrasing is kind of not that important for main idea questions because you can kind of just say, what is the main idea of the passage instead of the central idea? So we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. And then the investigation step is also pretty standardized. Before looking at the answer choices, we're going to consider why the author wrote the passage, referring back to it if needed. We're not going to focus on any single paragraph because this is the main idea. So that can look like, as we mentioned before, some forms of art are less understood than others. That's a main idea that we got from this passage. So we're going to take a look at the central idea answer choices. And if our prediction is some forms of art are less understood than others, does anyone want to shoot their shot and drop what they think the right answer would be in the chat based off of our prediction and what we think the right answer is? I'll give this like 10 seconds. Yes, Sarah, perfect. The right answer is D, because the answer that some art requires more effort and skill than most people assume perfectly, or not perfectly, but pretty closely matches our prediction that some forms of art are less understood than others, a lot more than the other question answer, or the other answer choices do. Fantastic. So we're moving on to another question. Because this question asks which of the following is stated by the author regarding an audience's typical attitude towards theatrical productions, we are going to figure out that this is a detail question because we're asking what the author has stated. It's a detail question. They target specific information from the passage in order to see what you can identify and understand as key details. They're going to be using declarative language, including the author claims or the passage states. So as a doctor, your patients are going to be giving you long, often like really roundabout histories that are going to include a lot of fluff information that they aren't going to recognize as not necessarily useful in the situation. It's your job to identify the important and relevant details and note those down for future reference in order to diagnose. So for detail questions, like with main idea questions, the rephrase step is basically automatic. Since they always ask about a specific detail, the job of the rephrase step is to simply ensure that you understand which detail you're looking for. We can rephrase this question to say, how do audiences typically feel about theatrical productions? And then we're moving on to investigate. So to investigate, we're going to use the analysis of the passage to determine where to navigate and find relevant detail. We have already interrogated this passage and we found that theatrical detail was mentioned in paragraph 2 in the following. You may not always need to return to the passage, but sometimes it can be really helpful. Sometimes that's where you're going to find the answer. And then by using the interrogate method, though you spend a little bit more time analyzing the passage, you're going to be able to spend less time answering the questions overall. If you need to interrogate the passage to trigger your memory of something, simply go back to that passage. And then based on this information, we're going to predict. We're going to make a prediction on our answer. Our prediction is going to be that audiences don't go to the theater just for visual effects. So having that in mind, we're going to look at the question choices and try and figure out which one is right. So A, the audience does not notice design during a production. This one might be a little tricky because it's worded really similarly, but that specifically is not mentioned in the passage. It's only stated that visual aspects are not generally why they go to the theater, not that it necessarily goes unnoticed. This is kind of important in terms of offering a reason why we go into the question with a strong prediction, as well as going back to the paragraph to understand really specified details. It's really common for the AAMC to write wrong answer choices in very tempting ways to try and get you to just click that one, figure out you're good to go and move on, while technically A sounds like it could be right, it would be the wrong answer. So if you take a class with us, you're going to figure out different strategies on how to figure out like trick questions, trick answers like that. But based off our prediction that audiences don't go to the theater for visual effects, we can see that reworded in D with visual design is not the primary motivation to attend a production. And then we got it right. We're moving on to a new type of question. All right, so implicit in the author's discussion about theater is the assumption that this is going to be an inference question. The term assumption in the question stem that we showed a little bit later on and that we're going to be giving to you as a free resource helps us identify this as an inference question. The word assumption should also have you thinking about how to investigate this question, since you'll be looking for unstated evidence rather than a conclusion. An inference is an unstated claim in an argument, so assumptions are unstated evidence while implications are unstated conclusions. Really important to know the difference there. The most common used words in inference questions are assume, because, conclude, infer, justify, reason, as well as variants of those, but it's just helpful to have an idea that this is asking what must be true. So rephrasing, we can take a look at the question and try to rephrase it in a way that makes sense to us. There's no right answer on rephrasing. Something that may make sense based off of this question is, which of the following is evidence that the author does not state, but still that must be true? So usually you're going to investigate an inference question by returning to the passage and re-examining relevant information from the argument. So from this passage, we know that the author thinks theater is collaborative and that visual aspects aren't the main reason people watch theater. You may be able to come up with a prediction or possibly just a collection of true statements. For inference questions, there are a lot of possible things that technically could be true. So taking your knowledge of the passage and moving it to investigate the answer choices is going to be super helpful. Based off of this, we're going to predict that visual design plays an important role because the author did not explicitly state that, but it is a really big main thing of the passage. Looking at our answer choices, the one that matches most closely with visual design plays an important role is going to be A. So B can be a little bit tricky, but we're not asking what the most important aspect is. That is why that is a wrong answer. Collaborative art is the best visual art. That is just an opinion. It doesn't necessarily have to be true. And then most set designers do not look the part. That can kind of be thrown off with her professor, who is a big person, build wise, but made like really small things. But the most accurate answer choice to our prediction is going to be A. Okay, we're on to another question. So we're almost through our questions. I just want to make sure we're getting a good example of them. The next one that we have is a definition in context question. So like detail questions, definition and context questions ask about specific language from the passage. They are included in the test as a way to determine if test takers understand the distinctive ways in which authors use language. So these questions can be like applied to the real world in terms of thinking about how most of your future patients are not going to have medical training. They're not going to likely have been through med school. So they're not going to have the proper terminology to describe their symptoms or what they're feeling or what they're in for that day. Instead, they're going to use words that they're familiar with and jargon that they have, and use that to describe what pain they're feeling or what sickness they're feeling or what brought them in. And it's your job as a physician to figure out what your patients are actually talking about and really translate that into something that can be used as a diagnosis or to be able to provide treatment. So definition and context questions usually use quotation marks or italics to call attention to a word or short phrase. Since this question refers to the default in this way, it can be typed as a definition in context question. A good rephrase could look like, what does the author mean by the default? Because that is essentially what they're asking here. And then since the word or the phrase usually carries a standard meaning, they're not going to be asking you for like a textbook dictionary definition of what this word or this phrase means. it's really helpful to go back to the paragraph and identify where they say the default. Luckily, they gave you this in paragraph 1. So here, the popular perception of these hardworking artists becomes the default, a hand wave of, oh, I'm sure it just comes together somehow. That is going to give us context for our prediction, which is going to be that people don't consider the effort behind visual design. And if that is our prediction, people don't consider the effort behind visual design, which one of these answer choices do we think that the default could tend to mean in terms of this passage? Which one of these answer choices is closest matched with our prediction? Need some like Jeopardy music in the background. Oh my gosh, Sarah, killing it. You're going to be the cars tutor for this group. Yeah, it's going to be B, which is just can be found by skimming the other options and seeing that an original natural state work of art does not really align with what our prediction was. And B is the option that closest aligns with our prediction based off of the interrogation that we've done. So it has to be right, and it is. And then we're moving on. So this question is going to be a detail question. However, this is going to be a little bit different than the detail question we were asking. So, asking previously. Unlike our first detail question that we went over, this question has the word except. So while it is a detail question, this is like an example of what we call the scattered variant. With scattered questions in particular, rephrasing becomes extra important in terms of getting us on a right prediction, an accurate prediction. So we are going to eliminate our double negative, in which the question turns out to look like something along the lines of the amount of money spent on production influences 3 of the following, because we want to get rid of that except. When we have an except that we're looking for, we're thinking of all the things that can be right and which one of those does not align with what we know. And it takes a lot of mental energy as well as a lot of time. So when we switch it to the amount of money spent on a production influences 3 of the following, we're just looking for 3 things that we have an absolute handle on what we know is right. So when we take an investigation, we're looking at a paragraph. These are the paragraphs in which this information is mentioned. Again, you're going to have a lot of notes and a lot of highlights when you're doing this specifically. So it's going to be more helpful when you're reading through it. And it may not make as much sense right here, but based off of this information, we are going to eliminate what we know is not right. So if we were to spend time going through it, we could go through the different answer choices and take a look at the different areas in which money influences a production. For this one, it is going to be, the exception is going to be the scope of a designer's vision as she delivers it to her colleagues, because based off of our investigation and what we know about the passages, all 3 other answer choices are going to be mentioned somewhere and written by the author, and this one is not going to be. So that is how you attack something that has a double negative. Rephrasing is going to be really helpful in terms of your approach on this type of question. Okay, this is our last question for the evening. I know I've been talking a lot at you for a little bit. I think y'all are really troopers for doing this presentation virtually because it's a lot of content and it requires a lot of participation from y'all in terms of following along. So I would like to thank you for getting us here so far. This is our last question again. So we're going to follow the same trim question. Based on the passage, which of the following is a responsibility of directors in creating a theatrical production? This is where that little helpful hint early on in the beginning to not use outside knowledge is going to be super helpful, because we are going to be looking specifically at what the author thinks a director's role is in creating a theatrical production. This is a detail type. If we rephrased it, we can ask, what do directors do? But specifically, according to the author, what do directors do? So we don't want to forget that piece. It can get really easy to let your outside knowledge influence what you think is a right answer. Stick to what the passage is telling you and nothing else. We're going to investigate. I remember that we talked about the director a little bit later on in our phrases towards the very end. And we noted that the director compromises on the initial design may, of course, these compromises may have to be made, but they are normally handled in consultation with the director and designers. So we can take a prediction that directors consult with designers on final project design. This is what the author has told us the role of a director is. So based off of what we know from our director and our prediction being directors consult with designers on final product design, final stage design, do we have a prediction on what the correct answer would be based off of our answer choices? What a director's role would be according to the author. It could be A, but if we're looking at specifically, the director is saying their compromises on the initial design may be made, but they're normally handled in consultation. It looks like B is going to be our right answer choice for today. Perfect, because this kind of matches with the designer's visions are going to be compromised, they're going to be negotiated. So understanding that negotiating and compromising are pretty synonymous can be helpful for finding a correct answer choice in this term. And it also just kind of matches up in alignment because they talked about the designer as well. So that is just really helpful in terms of getting those key words and key phrases. All right, fantastic. So as you can see, the car section really highlights how important the MCAT test expertise is for day of test success. You have to know science knowledge, no doubt about it. Don't like skip the rest of your classes and only study for cars, but it's also really helpful to take the cars approach when studying for your science content as well, because cars is not the only section on test day that is going to require you to think critically and have strategies for different question types. And be able to identify wrong answer choices. That's a really big one when taking this exam, is being able to identify wrong answer choices that are kind of masquerading as something that can be right. So the better that you know this exam, the better that you know how to rephrase questions, how to attack paragraphs, how to predict correct answer choices, the better you're going to score and the better that you're going to be. We have a whole lot of strategies and content breakdowns included in any of our Kaplan courses, as well as some free workshops. This was kind of just a drop in the bucket of what we have in terms of approaches to this different content area. If you take any live online or in-person courses, you're going to have 3 different class sections that are specifically tailored. There are 3 different 3-hour-long class sessions that are going to be specifically tailored to scoring well in the cars section, identifying all those question types, not just the ones that we looked at tonight. It's also going to come with all of these resources listed. I am an expert in matching. I'm like a matchmaker for students who are interested in courses and courses that are going to work with them. So it's my role to kind of get you tailor fitted to one of our courses. So if you have any questions about our course, please let me know. We have a really cool claim here at Kaplan that our practice exams are so realistic to the real exam that most test takers couldn't tell a difference when blindly tested. So that is really effective because it lets you know that you are studying something that is going to absolutely mimic what the exam is going to look like. Realistic practice is going to be essential in terms of getting a higher score and getting in that goal score range that you're hoping to get into. We also, any of our courses come with this personalized study plan, which I love so much because we recommend around 300 hours of studying for this exam. And it can be really, really daunting and just taxing to map out what those 300 hours are going to look like and map them out in an effective way that is touching all different content areas, that is really prioritizing the information that is going to give you a higher score, that is also incorporating those car sections. So if you take a course with Kaplan, we have you take a diagnostic test, and based off of that, we build your study plan for you that is going to look like something on this calendar. It is ever changing. You tell us how many hours per week you want to study for. You tell us how many days you want to study for. And based off of your diagnostic and that information, we're going to build you a study plan that is tailor-made to get you to score higher on your exam. And it's dynamic, so it's going to be changing throughout your progress with the course. If you get better at physics throughout the way, or you tend to slack off a little bit in sociology and you need some more help, we're going to notice that, we're going to identify that, and we're going to build in more practice as we see fit. Like I said, we have a ton of different prep options. We have live in-person courses at our Kaplan Center, which I have a few options. And the next slide, we also have on demand, where you don't necessarily meet live with a professor, but you have access to recordings. We offer tutoring, admissions counseling, build your own, a boot camp, all kinds of different stuff. If you're interested in anything with Kaplan, or you want to explore your options, please feel free to get some time with me, because that is my role here for you. I'm a free resource as you see fit at UCLA. And then here are our upcoming courses. 2 are in person at the Westwood Kaplan Center. We have some on Tuesday, Thursdays. We have some on Monday, Wednesdays. I did not list one in here, but we have one on Saturdays and Sundays if you only have weekends available. And then we also have live online courses that include those 14 different class sessions that are 3 hours long, but you meet online instead of meeting in person. We have new live online courses starting almost every day, almost every other day. So there's going to be a ton of options, and they meet once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. So there is no doubt going to be something for you if you're interested in like that live interaction portion. We also have an online boot camp, and I like to plug our boot camp by saying it's something that if you went into like an art history building and you picked out a sophomore art history person and you brought them into our MCAT boot camp, they're going to be able to like really competitively score well on their MCAT, because it is so intensive and it goes over anything and everything that you're going to be tested on this exam, because it is about 6 weeks of hour by hour courses and tutoring and one-on-one sessions and group sessions. So if you're someone who wants like really intensive prep, our online boot camp is absolutely going to be for you. I can answer any questions about this if you want to book some time with me, but it is really, really like the cream of the crop studying session if you are interested in doing very extreme studying for this exam. Again, my name is Haley Miller. I am the program specialist for your region. So you have unlimited access to me via my email, which is here, haley.miller@kaplan.edu. And that is also my calendar link. So if you type that link into your browser, it'll take you to my calendar. You can book some time with me for free. If you don't see a time session that works for you, shoot me an email. We'll get set up. It's really easy. It's free. We can talk about anything that we talked about here today, or any questions that you might have for preparing for this exam or taking this exam. And yeah, again, that was my presentation for the evening. We are going to make these slides available to you. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now, or send me an email afterwards, or anything like that. And we are here for you. Other than that, that is it from me tonight.
Thank you so much.